Whoa. One thing you're going to learn very quick is my spelling is atrocious. But it's okay, and I've got my notes. So, what do I want to do? And where am I going with all of this? You might be asking after my post on Facebook. ADHD is, in my over a decade of doing therapy and mediumship and everything else, ignoring my spiritual aspects and all this, we're talking very logically today. I've noticed a huge incline in ADHD specifically. ADHD and autism have been way going up. Now, we could argue a lot of this can be because there's more exposure of it and there's more talking of it. And you'll have to understand a lot of what I'm talking about in this and what I'm wanting to research does have some logistical application behind it as well as research behind it, but it's also in part playing good old devil's advocate, right? I write things very quickly, so ignore the spellings. If they wind you up, I'm so sorry. So one of the things we know about ADHD is it can be kind of like autism in terms of it is more on a spectrum. And when we say spectrum, we're not talking high functioning or low functioning. We're talking more about degrees of severity, right? Because the main thing we know is if we look at the brain, the main things that we're affecting is the front and the basal ganglia that sits somewhere around here, right? So you got your frontal lobe at the front here, which is all your cognitive function. And then over here, you've got your basal ganglia, which does the rest. And these two need to communicate, right? And the problem you got is if we look at these two in terms of a neuroscientist level, we're trying to send signals from here to here in this direction, mainly going from the cognitive to the basal, because obviously this is where we perceive and take information in, and then we're sending it to the deeper part of the mind to then assess and act. And a lot of the problem what we have is we're affecting the neurotransmitters within here, right? Okay, so this is the main problem we're having. So when most people might have, say, 5 lanes of traffic going from A to B, people with ADHD might only have 1. Or it can be blocked as well. That could be the other problem. And that also was quite systemically interesting because when I did my degree, I looked at synesthesia. God knows how you spell it, but I'll roughly put it there, synesthesia, which looked at the idea of hyperbonding and recognition within the brain. So basically, the theory was that, because there was about 4 theories, you had recognition, hyperbonding, oversensory feedback loops, and there was a 4th one, but the 4th one got debunked, so I don't talk about it anymore. And part of what it was looking at was basically different parts of the brain are wired up very differently. So hyperbonding was you had more than 1 lane. So you had like 3, 4 of these lanes going on. And then recognition was basically, it was kind of like when something went in, it looped back round, and the feedback loop was it going everywhere. So it's quite interesting that synesthesia and ADHD on the terms of the neurotransmission side are quite interlinked, which is kind of what got me down this trail of thought. So when I've spoken to a lot of people with ADHD, one of the main things they talk about is concentration. Okay? And we all know one of the big words within ADHD is attention, which is obviously the bit that is killing a lot of people. And interestingly, I find it seems to kind of divide into 2 categories when it comes to attention. Oh my God, I really can't spell today. My autism's playing itself up. Okay, go through this quick, so if you have ADHD, don't get too bored too quick. You have those that struggle to maintain, okay, which I tend to find is more 40% of the people that talk to me, but obviously this is from my own experience of people that keep sitting down and talking with me. And the other half struggle to put it in the right place or time. And that tends to be the other 60%. And it's quite difficult because obviously people with ADHD, it doesn't affect your intelligence, which is why I think creates part of the false perception of it. But in my eyes, it is a very, very disabling condition that you can have. Because if you can't put the intention in the right place, how can you expect to do anything? And you're almost at the sovereign mercy of ADHD dictating to you what you can do when, because it's such a strife within your brain, right? And it's like, you might want to sit down and practice this, or you might want to sit down and write that, and you can't because ADHD today says no. And part of the problem that we have with this from a behavioral standpoint, from my studies of research that I do in all my stuff is one of the great things that causes us to feel miserable at the end of the day is a lack of achievement. Because we tend to have an issue that when we wake up, we prescribe ourselves a series of tasks, right? And these tasks be things like, I want to get to work by 9 or 10, and then I'm going to get this, and this done. Then after that, I have my break, and then I'll go and do this, and then I'll go and do that. And some people, a lot of us live quite rigidly that, especially because we live in a capitalistic society. We have to kind of maintain these things because we need to earn and do the jobs and tasks we're given. But the problem you have is part of the problem you have with the lack of achievement syndrome is when you create your ritual in the morning, it's on the presumption that everything's going to go right and fall into place, yeah? Which is where you get a big problem, because you can say, right, I'm going to go to work and get there for 9. Well, you might have a traffic jam. The car might break down. It might not start. The trains might be on strike. The horrible stagecoach buses we have, which we know are all atrocious, might not turn up on time, because like they do half the time. They run on their own time zone, I swear. And when that happens, it's a domino effect, right? Because now you've either got to try and rush everything else and get it done, or not at all. Now, that's a challenge in itself for a neurotypical person. Now you come to someone with ADHD, and oh boy, you've got an even bigger problem, because the ADHD is dictating to you the amount of effort you can prescribe to what, when. And if you fight it, oh boy, does it not like it. So part of what's interesting about this is, and worrying is, okay, we know we have medications for this, which have all very long names. Forgive me, I haven't written them down or remember them. But we know at the moment that the FDA and the NHS are both talking about a shortage, which is what's worrying me, especially with ADHD people, is the fact that if you're entering an issue now, especially when we're way out of COVID and supply line issues and stuff in today's age, if you're having issues now with the supply chain of ADHD medication, then it's worrying me about the future. And there's a lot of evidence that's recently been coming out. That's what's making me wonder, or is there an alternative? So there's two main things that I want to look at changing. And one of them is dietary based. Okay, and the other one is much more, you could argue cognitive based would be the good word to do it, or your attitude towards it, which is quite an interesting prospect that I've got. Now, you have to remember what I'm doing here is I'm not profiting from any of this. There's no, buy this, buy that, or you're going to have to get this package or anything else. No sponsorships, nothing like that. This is literally a study that I'm doing on my own terms of all the research I've been doing over the years and everything else. And I'm trying to get some answers to look at why we can better achieve these two things, because what I've noticed is, especially in the UK, we're in a position where you'll have to forgive me if I keep touching my nose. I'm having a surgery in a few days because I've got a sinus issue and they're dealing with it, so I often get a runny nose. You have to forgive me. Sorry for too much information, but part of the issue is we're having to take our health more and more into our own hands, right? We've got the election coming up and everything else that's going on. The vote, I should say. Thinking of America too much. And we're having to put our health in our own hands because the NHS is so bad, and a lot of us can't afford our own private healthcare and things like this. So I'm trying to see if I can find some better mundane ways to help people on a baseline level to improve their lives with ADHD in particular at the moment, and I'll get to other conditions or things as we go along. So, and none of these two things I'm going to ask you to do are really extreme either. There's no huge changes, okay? So don't worry about that. But What was really interesting was that got me, we'll talk about the food first, the dietary based thing, and it's all going to come down to eggs. Literally, that's it. Eggs. I've summed up everything that I want you to do. It's to do with eggs, right? Spoiler alert. Eggs. There was a research done. Who was it by? It was the Rush Memory and Aging Project that was done, and the National Library of Medicine, the NCBI. You should go there sometimes. They do some really, really interesting studies and results. Showed that eggs, when consumed, lowered the probable cause of getting dementia hugely. Which is what got me thinking, because dementia is the deterioration of parts of the brain, especially the tissue of it, and that in itself affects neural links. I thought, well, perhaps then eggs have something else that they can affect when it comes to the issue we want, which is getting the cognition going and the signals better within the brain between the basal ganglia and the frontal cortex. And it's got me more interested as well, because what's more interesting through my research of schizophrenia, if you read Spolowski, I was reading a lot of Spolowski's work, who was a great professor, and he did talks at Harvard. The interesting thing about schizophrenia is, if you reach 30, it is very, very, very increasingly hard to get it, because normally schizophrenia, apart from the fact it's linked to a lot of research done from the that's completely wrong, sorry, L-DOPA movement, which then showed that having too much dopamine and serotonin causes a euphoria schizophrenia, which we knew from the stiff man syndrome issue we had going around. And through this, we realized that if the front cortex, which normally tends to fully develop somewhere between sort of 26 to 30, which is very dependent on gender, genome, and all other things, because it's very hard to disrupt its development anymore, because it slows a lot down in creating neural pathways and behaviors, it's very much harder to get schizophrenia. And that's interested me, because I wondered if in some aspects ADHD could be the same. Now, things you have to realize when it comes to neuroscience and neurochemistry. Now, this might be tiny bit outdated statistic, but I was taught when I was researching it, 80-20. It was down to the 80-20 rule. And what they believe, and whether it's still true, is basically 20% of neurological symptoms were geno or hereditary. And a lot of this was proven by the twin college experiments. Basically, there's a college in England where they get loads of twins. You have to forgive me, I can't remember the name at the moment. And they do a lot of things like PTSD, mental health, depression, all that, to see if it is genetic or if it's more environment-based. Because obviously, if you have identical twins, the only thing that's now differentiating them outside their genome is the environment, right? And then the other argument was, yes, 80% of this is environment, is what causes neurological conditions. This is everything from PTSD to schizophrenia. Okay. Now, one thing you have to bear in mind is environment and geno. There tends to be a bit of debate of where medication comes into this, because medication is obviously affecting your chemistry, which in turn can affect your environment, or you can argue it's a bit of your environment, and you get in a bit of a tit-for-tat game in where medication affects this. Now, the thing that I'm trying to correlate at the moment is, and it's kind of hard to fully distinguish because there's so many variable factors at work here, and we'll get back to the dietary and the eggs in a minute, is when you're young and we know, okay, you're coming up to the 26 to the 30 mark, your brain is very doughy, right? Very malleable to create new pathways, which is why it's essential. And especially in the very, very young years, right? In your sort of 0 to, I think it's 3.5 years. All of that, and even less, your 0 to, I think it's 2 years, all of this step here is hugely important for communication and language development, right? Which is why people that are born deaf temporarily, because they might have blocked cochlars or eardrum issues or things like this, have to learn sign and then have a lot of problems with spelling, grammar and language and logistics further on. And if you want to research more than that, it's quite interesting because a lot of that comes back to what we call pigeon languages and things like this, which is the development sequence of a language, of how they all came about today. So my question is well, if ADHD is on the rise and I'm seeing it more and more, then is there an environmental change that is causing that? And the environmental change could be a whole huge number of things, which is what's got me concerned, because I am seeing it myself and lots more people reporting it. And this is where we have to sort of play devil's advocate, because I'm not finding a lot of people beyond 30 ever reporting it. It's all, especially women in their 20s, that are always saying it to me when they sit down to have mentoring or therapy or sessions with me and everything else. And obviously I have to look at the whole board of possibilities here. This is now where we're entering my theory stage. This is now not set information, right? So you might have heard this term, TikTok brain. Okay, some of you might roll your eyes, or what the hell is he on about, TikTok? Part of the problem we got is, if you look at the generational divides, on my theory is, our parents or people in their 40s and 50s up, when they learned education and did things, we had to do stuff in long format, right? We learned things over long periods of time. We read a whole book, or we sat for a whole film, or we did this and we did that, and we had to be here for this, and you had to read a map to get to the information of where you had to go and work it all out. Everything was long format because of the technology of the time. Whereas now everything is short format, right? Which is good and bad at the same time, because we're writing a lot better, publications are a lot better, technology is a lot better, we can get to the information we need a lot better, and we're cutting a lot of the necessary information out, right? Like what I've done here, I've put down short spurts of information just to remind me on footnotes of the statistics and things in my head. But you could argue that if you're growing up and your brain is being neurologically divided into taking content or anything you're learning always in short bursts, that's where you're then relating. You're kind of doing two things. You're relating the achievement of absorbing the knowledge in short bursts, which when you've then accomplished that gives you the dopamine and serotonin, right? Because that's the thing we're looking for, because that's our behavioral driver, is serotonin and dopamine is what we're always looking for. Sera and dopa. And if we keep consuming stuff in short bursts, then we'll naturally create a link of, well, if I do this as quick as I can, and within 5 minutes I want to get this dopamine and get to this, okay? Rather, when our parents before used to do it in long footholds, they waited more in the anticipation of reaching the end of the goal for the dopamine, whereas we have a much shorter anticipation. And the anticipation is the key word, because a lot of research, if you look at Jordan Peterson, for instance, he talks about the most addictive slot machine. And Spolowski does the same, that we actually know a lot of addiction and or dopamine hits and serotonin hits don't actually come sometimes from the act itself, but a lot of the time from the anticipation of it coming. Which is why short term is great, because the short term is a much shorter activity to get through. We're not waiting 6 months anymore now, you know, we're waiting 2 minutes and then it will come or not, and then we move on to the next thing. It's kind of like we can bin that motive very quickly and move on. But that in itself creates a lot of issues with attention, because obviously everything you're doing short format, which in itself is correlating to one of the main problems with ADHD, right? Which is short attention spans, or attention going in the wrong place. We're ignoring the hyperdeficit at the moment. That could be for another study another day. So TikTok brain is one of my theories why it is. My other theory is diet, okay? So this is where the study that's coming in with eggs is really important, because when we looked at the Russian The Memory Age project, as it showed, that's the wrong rubber, eggs is some kind of mineral superfood, and we know, especially if you look at the works of Max Lukaveri, something like that you pronounce it, I'll link him in the stuff, or if people ask, I'll send it. He talks about eggs, and we know because of eggs we literally have everything we need to grow a brain pretty much in there, in an egg, especially if you think about the fact that obviously an egg does eventually give birth to a chicken. And we know the fact that if we look at our diets, we have a lot of refined grains, okay? a lot of refined grains, and most of our food is fortified. And there is a reason for this. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go too far down the whole conspiracy theory route, although I do think part of it, I think there is a strong argument for, yes, the pharmaceutical companies and medical companies are linked in all this, but we're not going down that argument, okay, because it's irrelevant anyway, and that isn't what the purpose of this study is for. But part of the reason why I think this happened is because obviously society, if we look at logistically, society was growing, right? We didn't have to feed one person anymore, we had to feed 100. And because of this, we had to find a way of getting a lot of calories out to give everybody enough food. And the perfect example of this would be corn syrup, right? Because it's very quick to manufacture, you can get loads of it out and you can do it, and bread's another great example of this. Problem is we're creating enough of it through refined and fortified methods to get the calories out, but no nutritional value. We're literally just handing you energy. We're not handing you the actual carbonates you need or the actual ions you need and everything else and the vitamins you need. We're just handing you energy, which in a lot of ways you can relate to pure sugar, right? That's a big problem. And if you look more and more at the sort of modern studies now of Coke and how the body absorbs it, especially Diet Coke, it's quite frightening what's being said and done. But I'm not here to make you change your whole diet, because that in itself requires a lot of willpower and requires a whole lifestyle change. At the moment, I want you just to do a very, very small thing. And all I want you to do is have 2 eggs a day. Okay? 2 whole eggs a day. Now, I explain why afterwards, but how I want you to have them is you can have them scrambled, you can have them egg and soldiers, you can have them fried, you can have them, yolked in some way, you can have them poached, you can have them any way you want. The only thing you can't do is use them more like an ingredient, i.e., put it in bread and then break it right down into the bread and the flour and everything else, because then you're not consuming 2 whole eggs. You have to try and consume 2 whole eggs. So egg and mayo is a good example in a sandwich. 2 boiled eggs, 2 fried eggs, 2 a day, right? Which, to be honest with you, if this does prove very fruitful, is probably over what you're going to need. Because a lot of the studies done with the Russian Memory Project was just 2 a week, but I'm doing it 2 a day for a reason. Part of the reason being is eggs are healthy for you anyway, and they have everything you need. There's not a lot of calories in 2 eggs, depending on what you have them with, obviously, but there's not too many calories in 2 eggs, and it's not too boring or achievable. If this is too much for you, which it might be, then try and do 2 every other day. Got the whole whiteboard in the camera, haven't I? So it don't matter. Every other day, or 1 egg a day. But part of me, what I want to do is kind of semi-overload you with eggs a bit, because there's certain minerals in here that I'm after for you to have. So we still can't fully know if a lot of neurotypical problems like dementia are fully caused by diet, right? But don't worry about that. Having too many eggs doesn't cause you any harm, not I'm aware of, and you can feel free to research that, but I haven't read anything about having too many eggs, okay? Obviously, you've got to just make sure your eggs are well cooked. But we know that eggs lower heart disease, because we know it does cholesterol, and we know it affects Alzheimer's. So we know that in an egg, it's essentially a superfood, because it has 9 amino acids. Here come the big brandy words, amino acids. Okay. And the vitamins it has vitamins A, D, E, and B in equally large amounts, which are all very, very, very important. The other thing we know is it has 10 minerals that are all essential. But in a lot of ways, I don't actually care about that. It's good and it's going to be part of what we want, 100%. It's going to be good and part of what we want. Sorry if I'm rubbing stuff out too quick. Feel free to go back and screenshot it, or you can play this all you want. I just don't want this video to be ridiculously long, which is why I want to be a bit quick. choline. It's either spelt like that or it's spelt like that. You have to forgive my dyslexia. It's been a bane all my life with all my research and stuff, but I'm getting over it slowly. Choline is super important because it affects hugely the development of the brain, right? And you should do a lot of feel free to Google this because I could do a whole lecture on just choline, okay? And you have to realize that 90% of us lack the adequate amount of choline that we should have in our diet. 90%, okay? And you have to remember this statistic is to Western culture. So UK, USA, Europe, yada, 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 okay? Ignore like Asia. Very, very different dietary requirements and that over there. Now, the membrane is one of the main things that needs choline, but also standard cognitive function. So what I'm hoping is if we put a lot more choline in your diet, as well as this balanced multivitamins and minerals, what you're doing is you're fortifying the connection between the basal ganglia and the frontal cortex. Because you're strengthening, because you're... How's a good analogy to put this down? It's kind of like if you have a car. Here's my car. 1 wheel, 2 wheel. Right, we have our little man. He's cruising along with a cigarette. Okay. And you've noticed when you go, you have like the average fuel, okay, and then you have like the super fuel. Think of it the same way. If you put the super fuel in, you're going to get a lot more miles per gallon and a lot more of your way, right? Which is what we want. If we put the average fuel in, we just get average results. Now, the problem you got is you've kind of got an engine that needs the super fuel. It needs a lot more of what's in the super fuel. It needs the refinement. It needs a lot more to get the power and everything down, which is then going to give us more mileage and more efficiency to our engine being our brain, right? Which is what I'm concerned about it doing. So do I have any evidence of this working? Yes, I do. So I have a lovely, lovely friend. I won't call her out for her privacy reasons. Her name isn't Sarah, but we're going to call her Sarah. And I asked her to do this for me. I said, can you have 2 eggs a day? That's what I asked her to do, and she did it. And after 1 week, she had way more concentration. And the other thing she had was, in her words, she felt sharp. Oh God, that's really bad, sorry. She felt sharp, which she hadn't done in a long time. Now, she knows she suffers with ADHD. Her mother suffers with ADHD, and we're not talking about if it's hereditary or anything else like that. But she had a lot of problem with concentration, she had a lot of problem with drive, and she had a lot of problem with getting on with what it is she wanted to do. So her and her lovely partner made sure that she had 2 eggs a day, and after 1 week, this is what she came back with. After 2 weeks, she said, I've never done so much before in my life, and now, because she's waking up and she's feeling she's got a lot more energy. I mean, she's in control of where her attention's going, okay? Now, there is a flaw to this, okay, which I am very aware of, which is why I'm not trying to pull the wool over your guys' eyes. One thing she's very susceptible to is obviously a placebo effect. Okay, that's not how you spell placebo, but we'll roll with it. That's how we spell it today. The placebo effect, which is the idea because she believes it's doing something, it will do something. And we have to play devil's advocate with that. So at the moment, the way I get around this is by having a much larger sample base, which is where you guys come in, having 2 eggs a day, all right? So that's where that comes in. That's that bit done. That's it. That's all I want you to do. You're going to have 2 eggs a day, and then you're going to sit down. Well, ironically, sit down, yes. It's literally what I want you to be able to do is sit down and do things that you need to do. And I want you to do it for 2 weeks and see how it goes, and then possibly 2 more weeks. Because I feel a month would be a good round off for this. Cognitive attitude is the other part I want to look at. So how do we go about explaining this one? Constitution's a good word. Because constitution in a lot of ways is your resilience to do stuff. Now, the way I explain it is, or I look at it is, there's a very good book. I've forgotten what my name is, Dr. something, isn't he? It's called The Chimp Paradox. Chimp Paradox. And basically, he argues that your brain is in, there are 3 parts in other works, but he splits it down to 2 parts, which is you have the computer, which is your logic, which is not going very well for me at the moment, writing like this. And then you have your monkey, okay? And your monkey is your emotional thinking. And the problem with the monkey is, it's illogical. I don't know if you can see that down there. You might be able to. It's illogical. I hope you can see all this. If not, it's not going to be the end of the world because I'm talking about it. Problem you have with ADHD is the way I like to look at a lot of mental health complications and personality disorders is the thing they're affecting is the monkey, okay? Because yes, there are obviously ways you can argue it's affecting how you're digesting things and perceiving things and the logistics of it, but it's illogical reasoning is always what you're coming down to 9 times out of 10, especially if you look at things like anxiety, right? If you look at anxiety and PTSD, a lot of the time it is false evidence based, appearing real, i.e. you could get on a train, but if I get on the train, it might break down, or this might happen, or I might really, really, really need the loo, or this and that. And it's like, well, if you have a pee before, you probably won't need the loo. Train is very unlikely to break down. It's going to stop where you need it to. It won't skip it. And people probably don't care that you're on it and all that. And obviously, I'm watering this right down. It's more complex than this. But false evidence is telling you the opposite. ADHD monkeys, the way I look at it is, as an analogy to bring it down, is their problem is one of 2 things. They're self-hedonistic, so it's what I want now, which is where your attention is diverted, and they are quick to get bored. That's bored as in like a waterboard, is it? B-O-R-E-D. I seriously need to sort my spelling out, man. They're quick to get bored. And I find this is part of the problem. So if you have ADHD, part of, I think, is the problem is where you're stuck in a capitalistic society, i.e. a lot of us work 9 to 5, which is obviously a proverbial term here, or we work in long strips of hours. We're trying to work more of what's acceptable of a neurotypical. Just obviously, you can break this down to saying it's a construct of the education system, right? And then you have the whole debate of the modern education system is built to make soldiers or make obedient people and all of that. And there's loads of research into that. And there's luckily a lot of awakening to saying, well, the school system is inadequate and it's not working. But if you look at the school system and how it functions and how you function at work, it's very similar, right? You go to a workplace, you go at a certain time, you arrive at school at a certain time, right? You have your lessons planned out, you have your timetable planned out, you go and do this, then you have your allocated lunch, work, you have your allocated lunch, you have a manager that tells you what to do or higher up that tells you what to do, and you get on with your own task and everything else. The only difference is you're researching a lot more at school and obviously doing a lot of play and social play and discovering stuff, whereas at work you're working towards a different kind of achievement. But the infrastructure of the timetable was very similar, and I think that a lot of the time is the issue, right? Because the way I've tried dealing with it with some of my clients lately, and it's proving quite fruitful, and you have to remember that this isn't a one-trick pony that's going to save all of you, but it might help some of you, And obviously I'll be talking to a lot of you individualistically and breaking you down and interviewing you and helping you and everything else like that. And that's all free as well, don't worry. It's to be more modular with time. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, the monkey inside you, your ADHD monkey or your ADHD chimp, one thing that it absolutely loves, okay? Dopamine, as we said before, and serotonin. And it absolutely loves this stuff. It is the equivalent of catnip. So my theory was, well, when you're spending too much time on one task, it gets very bored. So let's split the tasks up. And this is easier said than done. I'm aware of this. And a lot of this is probably going to apply a lot better for people that are self-employed or creative or working at home or from home. And it's going to be quite a bit harder to apply if you work a job where you have to sit at a certain station with certain stretches of time, in which case we'll have to sit down and talk and navigate ways you can place your mindset within the same station into different things to sort of break down more on a micro level than a macro level. Because everything I'm talking about at the moment is going to work very well for macro stuff, okay? So we're very guilty of, let's say, for example, I've got 4 things that I need to do today, right? I need to do the washing, which is going to take 30 minutes. This is just random numbers for argument's sake. Okay, I need to do, I don't know, the shopping. We're looking at mundane tasks here. I need to do I don't need this now, my piano practice. We're going to start this one because creatives are normally a very, very affected thing. My piano practice, and I need to go and socialise. And this is all phone based. Part of the problems that we have is neurotypical people that love routine, they'll go, okay, I'm going to do this. This is obviously just for argument's sake here and just for brevity. I'm going to do this at 9. I'm going to do this at 10. I'm going to do this at 11. And I'm going to do this at 12, okay? Or this is also throughout the day, throughout the day, TTF. Is it F or T? Oh, it doesn't matter, throughout the day. Okay, phone-based, liking the posts, sharing stuff, replying to messages. And we know that a lot of people with ADHD suffer from withdrawal because they find this very heavy to balance, and they find it very heavy to balance their work and life time and energy. Obviously, what I'm hoping is the eggs is going to mitigate some of this issue, because you're going to have a lot more energy to feel like you can smash all these things because you're ascertaining more control. So you want to do this. However, your monkey, here he is in all his evil glory, or difficult in its glory, I should say, sorry. He's going, no, sod that. I'll do this. And I'm torn between these two. But you'll do this when I say, and I want you to do this at 3, and you're going to do this never. And this one you're going to do if I feel like it for 5 minutes, but then I'm bored, okay? And that's the way you're going to have it, because what I want to do is I want to sit down and binge watch stuff, because it's easy and it's hedonistic. Now remember, hedonistic pleasure, a lot of people misconstrued the word hedonistic pleasure with things like sex and that. It doesn't have to be. It's hedonistic pleasure is maximizing your gratification in the moment of what it is. And then obviously with everything else down the line, the interpretation or social relation to it, yes, it comes to things like eating what you shouldn't be, or having sex you shouldn't have, or doing promiscuous things, all those kinds of stuff, right? For lack of a better word at the moment, because my brain's all over the place with this. You need to control your monkey. So how can we get around that? Well, my theory was if we break these tasks right down, but we also make them modular. So instead of doing this, it's not going well for me, is it? We're going to go, right. I have 12 hours to do this. And the ones that are priority is the piano and the shopping. The washing can wait a day or two, but we're really low on food, so these two are priority, so I have to make sure I get these two done, right? The others, I'm happy if I get them done, but it's not the end of the world. Now, that's really important, because what you're doing is by having that way of thinking, you're parlaying the monkey. Because the monkey likes to, a lot of the time, go against what it is you want to do, right? It wants the opposite. It doesn't like extreme effort. It likes to be lazy. And you have to understand this. And the Chimp Paradox book explains all this beautifully and goes through it. And this is just a great way of analyzing different parts of the brain and going, rather than going to deep neuroscience with it, which is just going to be a whole facade and boring conversation. So parlaying with the monkey, there's another way you can do it, which is to barter with it, okay? And this is what I've been telling my clients to do lately. What you're going to do is instead is you're going to go and do the shopping. When you've done the shopping, you're going to reward yourself, the sort of thing that you know your monkey likes. So it could be anything from a small bar of chocolate to I'm going to watch one of my programs to I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to spend a bit of time with my special person, something small. You don't want something huge, like I'm going to go buy a whole new pair of shoes, right? You do that for bigger achievements, otherwise you could be very broke very quick. You want to do it on very, very small things. So what starts happening is your monkey starts going, well, hang on a minute. I kind of want to do this now because when we last did that, I got this. And I did it very quickly, right? TikTok brain. You're doing something very quickly and you're getting reward at the end of it. Now, you'll then move on to the next thing. So you'll go, well, I'll do piano practice. I know if I do that, I'll reward myself with something else, like a nice hot bath, or I'll reward myself with another episode of my show, or something else like that. Something, it can be very small, minute things. It hasn't got to be big rewarded things all the time. The mind goes, hang on a minute, I like this. Because I know now if I do piano practice with you, I now want to push your attention here and force you to discipline here a bit more because I want the reward, right? And it's that perception that we're having of the foreseeable serotonin and dopamine afterwards, like just like addiction, literally how addiction works, that we're now bartering with and manipulating within our environment to change our attitude, right? That's the idea of this. And then the good thing is if you've done these two and your monkey then starts having a fit, the other two don't matter anymore because you haven't prescribed yourself the ritual of failing before to get those things done. So you shouldn't have the element of depression so much or the negative thinking, right? And this is a lot harder to do. It takes time. You've got to remember, you for years have been thinking a very different way or treating things very differently. And we're just trying to change how we're looking at the problem and how we're dealing with it in a way that's more modular. And you can do things like, well, I haven't got to do the washing here. I'll do the washing afterwards, after I've done this. But make sure you have your reward in the middle, okay? And then work with things. And a lot of people have started doing it. So have said to me, you know, it's really working for me now because I'll go and do this and I'll work for an hour or even just half an hour. Then I'll go and do this and I feel really great. So now I want to move on to the next thing because what you're doing is because you're rewarding the thing it doesn't normally want to do, it now wants to do it. Yeah? That's what we're looking for. We're exchanging that effort for reward to help the monkey, where the monkey doesn't want to put any effort in the first place, which is why it likes hedonistic pleasure. Okay. So that's quite a lot harder to explain, but hopefully that's in a lot of ways summed up the two things that I want you to do. Now, some of you might want to just do one bit. Some of you might just want to do both of it. Some of you might want to just try it out in different ways. Some of you might not get it. And if you don't get it, we'll just have a phone conversation or a video call about it, I suppose would be better. And I'll re-explain it, or we can go through about how we can do it in your environment. Obviously, there's quite a few of you, so there might be a bit of waiting, but this is what I do for a living. So I have quite a lot of time to dedicate to all of this. And obviously the other thing I like to do with you lot is interview you. And you haven't got to do this, because this is the next bit I need to cross with you lot now. Now you got to the end of this. We've got the interview side of it, which would be me sitting down with you going, hey, you know, have you been nice? Have you not? What traits do you have? What difficulties do you have? Have you found this has helped? Those kind of questions. And we could talk about all sorts of things as well. It doesn't have to just be about ADHD, because I do podcasts and things like that. If you ever want to talk about stuff off your chest or explore other problems or morale stuff, I'm always for it. The other thing I would like to start doing is building a community with this. So part of me is thinking, obviously I found a lot of you on the salads, but we could do a WhatsApp group, or we could do a Facebook group as well. And the idea is all of you are relating to yourselves with ADHD, and you can all talk. You can all say, hey, Dante, what you've done is 100% not working. It's a load of baloney. And you have to remember, I'm not promising this works. I've got no idea. It might just be a coincidence. It might do nothing. It might help some. It might not help others. It might be other factors as to why. Like I said, placebo effects, I don't know, but it's worth giving it a damn shot to see how this goes. And if it don't work, I'll go back to the bloody drawing board and come up with something else. The other thing I'd like to do is give you guys, it's not therapy sessions, but mentoring sessions. And these are obviously free, obviously. These don't cost you a penny. You haven't got to do this, or this. If you really want, you can just do it and just WhatsApp me, or I'll hand you some kind of PDF or something. You can just fill it out and just hand it back to me, whether that be anonymously or not. But obviously, you have to remember, the more information I have and the more communication I have with you, the better we can control the environment, which is really important with dietary-based studies, as well as we can all help each other navigate this. Because this isn't for my benefit, right? I don't have ADHD. I don't believe I do anyway. I've done tests. I know I have autism. I've been officially diagnosed with that, but I don't have ADHD as far as I know, because I can concentrate on stuff for a long time and everything else, and I don't tend to have a lot of the signifiers of it. And it's the attention point that I'm looking at. I know there's loads of other factors with the mood swings and everything else that can come with ADHD, but we're focusing at the moment on the attention deficit at the moment. That's the bit I want to conquer. Then we'll get to the other part of it at another date. So that's my plan. So if you're curious what the mentoring is, mentoring and therapy, they can be the same but different. I'm not a counsellor. I mean, like I said, I am a psychic medium, and take that with what you will, but I'm someone that's very 50-50 with it. I do question it, which is why I've gone into the neurological sciences, and I believe that life is quite paradoxical. I believe it's a spiritual experience as well as a scientific one, but we're looking at purely scientific this way. So mentoring is much more about governing your life, having a objective point of view, navigating you through issues, finding solutions, exploring your emotions. It's not stuff like bereavement counselling. Okay, I could talk about the process of that, but I can't do things like diagnose you. I can't prescribe you medicine. I can't do anything like that. I'll get in big trouble for 1 and 2. I wouldn't want to, because I'm not qualified to. But what I can do is talk to you and get through things and go through everything and diagnose it, okay? But I can't act like a psychiatrist or anything like that. What I can do is say, well, a lot of what you're telling me is, yes, showing a lot of ADHD or what I've heard a lot before, so go and see a specialist and go from there, right? I can't say, hey, here's the stamp of approval of ADHD, because of the system and how it works, okay? So that's the other part of it. And then over time, we'll start consolidating all this research, and I'll try and get an even larger sample over time, or we'll try other things. And that's it. Sorry it took so long to go through, but it's much better I did it this way than give you all a message. And so many of you have replied, I'll be sending messages all day long. I'll be a postman for the day, essentially. So that's it. That's what the experiment is. It is 2 eggs and different modular thinking, and a form of, I suppose, ADHD cognitive thinking in a lot of ways. And that's it.